I've seen what lurks in the darkness. They're not dreams. They speak, they scratch, they wait. Barrow isn't just a town, it's a gateway. And when the lights go out, they come. Be careful. They might already be inside you.
I've studied their nightmares, the marks on the skin, the cuts, the whispers. They're not just dreams. They're watching us, testing us. And when the darkness falls, they act. Barrow isn't safe. None of us are.
Nightmare in Barrow, the town that never sees the sun. The first thing Liam noticed when he arrived in Barrow was the silence. Not the ordinary quiet of a small town, but something deeper, suffocating, as if the air itself were lying in wait. It was the beginning of winter, and night had fallen over the town with no promise of dawn. For 65 days, Barrow would remain submerged in darkness, a phenomenon the locals seemed to accept with a strange resignation. Liam was an investigative journalist, accustomed to uncovering hidden truths. He had come to Barrow to investigate a pattern of inexplicable disappearances that stretched back decades. People vanished without a trace, especially during the period of unending darkness. The local police attributed the cases to the extreme cold, claiming the bodies were likely buried under the snow. But some families insisted their loved ones had simply disappeared inside their homes. On his first night in the small rented apartment, Liam woke at 3:33 a.m. to a muffled sound. It wasn't the wind. Something was scratching the wall outside. He rose slowly, his feet sinking into the worn carpet, and approached the frost-covered window. The street was empty, but then, under the flickering light of a pale street lamp, he saw something that froze his blood. Footprints in the snow. They didn't lead from point A to point B. They didn't come from anywhere. They simply started there, in the middle of the street, and led directly to his door. Liam felt a chill crawl up his spine. The footprints looked wrong. The toes were too long, almost deformed like claws. The next day, he took this information to the only contact he had in town, Dr. Evelyn Marsh, a sleep disorder researcher who had come to Barrow to study an alarming phenomenon. A growing number of residents reported having the same nightmare every night.
You're saying you saw footprints that appeared out of nowhere?
I know how it sounds, but I saw them. And that's not the only strange thing. I woke up with this horrible feeling, like someone was standing in the room watching me.
That fits with what I've been studying. Some residents have come to me claiming they wake up in the middle of the night, feeling a presence in the room, but they can't move or scream.
Liam swallowed hard. He knew the symptoms of sleep paralysis, but something about Barrow felt different.
And the strangest part is that some patients wake up with marks on their skin, thin cuts, almost like scratches.
Liam felt a shiver. He remembered the sensation he'd had upon waking and noticed something he'd ignored before. He rolled up his sleeve. There, on his forearm, were 3 parallel marks, thin and precise, as if something had dragged its claws across his skin. At that moment, Evelyn's phone rang. She answered, and Liam watched her expression shift to pure horror.
What? When? Jonas Tate? Yes, I know him. I'm on my way.
Evelyn hung up and stood abruptly.
A man named Jonas Tate was just found in the town square. He was muttering something about the shadows coming.
Liam didn't hesitate.
Let's go.
When they arrived at the snow-covered square, they saw a small crowd gathered around a man kneeling on the ground. Jonas Tate was one of Barrow's oldest residents, his wrinkled skin covered in small cuts, as if something had scratched him repeatedly. He trembled, his wide eyes fixed on the darkness beyond the streetlights. Liam knelt beside him.
Jonas, what happened?
The old man looked at him, his voice a hoarse whisper.
They're not dreams.
Who? What did you see?
They walk in the darkness. They speak in your dreams. But it's not just a nightmare, boy. They're coming.
Then all the lights around them flickered violently, and for a moment, as darkness enveloped the town, Liam saw something. Something slender with hollow, glowing eyes watching him from the shadows. And then, it was gone. The lights returned, but the unease lingered. The crowd in the square had dispersed, leaving only Liam, Evelyn, and Jonas, who now sat on a bench muttering incoherently. His hands trembled as he clutched a small, weathered notebook.
Jonas, what are you holding?
The old man's eyes darted to her, then back to the notebook. He opened it with shaky hands, revealing pages filled with frantic scribbles, crude drawings of shadowy figures with elongated limbs and hollow eyes. Beneath the drawings were phrases repeated over and over.
They speak in the dark. They are always watching. The visitors are coming. They speak in the dark. They are always watching. The visitors are coming. They speak in the dark. They are always watching. The visitors are coming.
Liam's breath caught.
Who are the visitors, Jonas?
They've been here longer than us. They sleep beneath the ice in the dark. But when the sun leaves, they wake.
Jonas, have you seen them? Have they hurt you?
They don't just hurt you. They take you into the dark, into the cold, and you don't come back.
Before Liam could press further, Jonas suddenly stood, his eyes wide with panic.
They're here.
The lights flickered again, and this time they didn't come back on. The square was plunged into darkness. Liam fumbled for his phone, turning on the flashlight. The beam cut through the black, illuminating Jonas's terrified face. And something else. Behind him, a shadow moved. It was tall, impossibly thin, with limbs that bent at unnatural angles. Its eyes glowed faintly, like embers in the dark. Liam's heart pounded as he took a step back, the light trembling in his hand.
Evelyn, do you see that?
But before she could answer, the shadow lunged. Jonas screamed as the figure wrapped its spindly arms around him, dragging him into the darkness. Liam and Evelyn rushed forward, but the shadow was gone, leaving only Jonas's notebook lying in the snow. The lights flickered back on, and the square was empty. Liam picked up the notebook, his hands shaking.
We need to find out what's happening, now.
There's something else. The nightmares, they're not just dreams. They're messages. And I think Jonas was trying to warn us.
Liam opened the notebook to the last page. Scrawled in jagged handwriting was a single sentence.
When the lights go out, they'll take you too.
The town of Barrow felt even colder after Jonas's disappearance. Liam and Evelyn retreated to Evelyn's makeshift research lab, a cluttered room filled with monitors, sleep study equipment, and stacks of files. On one wall, a map of Barrow was pinned, dotted with red markers where disappearances had occurred.
This isn't just a pattern. It's a trail. The disappearances always happen near areas where the town's power grid is weakest, places where the darkness is thicker.
You think these things, these visitors, are drawn to the dark?
Not just drawn to it, they are the dark. Jonas said they sleep beneath the ice. What if they're not just hiding there? What if they're part of it?
Liam's mind raced. He flipped through Jonas's notebook, stopping at a page filled with symbols that looked like a mix of ancient runes and jagged, chaotic lines.
Do you recognize this?
It looks like some kind of warning, or maybe a ritual, something to keep them at bay.
Before they could delve deeper, the power in the lab flickered. The monitors buzzed and the room was plunged into darkness. Liam's phone flashlight was the only source of light, casting long, eerie shadows on the walls.
Evelyn, we need to...
A sound cut him off. A low, guttural whisper coming from the corner of the room. It wasn't a language either of them recognized, but the tone was unmistakable, hungry, menacing. Liam swung the flashlight toward the sound, and his breath caught. A shadow was peeling itself off the wall, its form shifting and twisting like smoke. Its glowing eyes locked onto Liam, and it began to move toward them, its movements jerky and unnatural.
Run!
They bolted from the lab, the shadow close behind. The hallway was pitch black, and Liam's flashlight flickered as they ran. The whisper grew louder, echoing in their ears, as if the darkness itself was speaking. They burst into the street, but the town was no safer. The streetlights were out, and the snow-covered ground seemed to absorb what little light remained. Liam's flashlight beam swept across the empty street, revealing more shadows, dozens of them, emerging from alleys, doorways, and even the ground itself.
They're everywhere.
Liam grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the only place he could think of, the town's old church. Its steeple loomed in the distance, a faint light glowing from its stained glass windows. As they ran, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. Liam felt a cold hand brush against his back, and he stumbled, nearly dropping the flashlight. Evelyn pulled him up, her face pale but determined. They reached the church and slammed the door shut behind them. The interior was dimly lit by candles, and the air was heavy with the scent of incense. An elderly priest stood at the altar, his back to them.
Father, we need help. There's something out there.
The priest turned, and Liam's words died in his throat. The man's eyes were hollow, his skin pale and cracked like ice. His mouth moved, but the voice that came out wasn't his. It was a chorus of whispers, cold and alien.
You cannot hide from the dark. It is already inside you.
Evelyn grabbed Liam's arm.
We need to go, now.
But as they turned to leave, the candles flickered and went out. The church was plunged into darkness, and the whispers surrounded them, closing in from every direction. Liam's flashlight flickered one last time before dying completely. In the pitch black, he felt something cold and clawed wrap around his wrist. And then, the screaming began. The screaming stopped as abruptly as it had begun. Liam's flashlight flickered back on, casting a weak beam of light around the church. Evelyn was gone. The pews were empty, the candles still extinguished. Only the faint sound of dripping water broke the silence. Liam's heart pounded as he called out,
Evelyn?
The whispers were gone, but the air felt heavier, colder. Liam's breath fogged in front of him as he moved toward the altar. The priest's body lay crumpled on the floor, his hollow eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. On the altar, Liam found a single sheet of paper. It was covered in the same jagged symbols from Jonas's notebook, but one phrase stood out, written in English.
Beneath the ice, they wait. Beneath the ice, they hunger.
Liam's mind raced. He remembered Jonas's words, "They sleep beneath the ice." If the visitors were tied to the darkness, then the endless night of Barrow's winter was their domain. But what if the ice itself was more than just a hiding place? What if it was a prison? He grabbed the paper and ran out of the church. The town was eerily silent, the streets empty. The snow crunched under his boots as he made his way to the edge of town, where a frozen lake stretched out into the darkness. There, standing at the shore, was Evelyn.
Evelyn!
She turned, and his relief turned to dread. Her eyes were hollow, her skin pale and cracked like the priest's. Her voice was a whisper, cold and alien.
They showed me the truth. The ice isn't just a barrier, it's a gateway.
Evelyn, what are you talking about?
Beneath the ice, there's a world of darkness, and they want to bring it here.
Before Liam could respond, the ice began to crack. The sound was deafening, like thunder rolling across the frozen surface. Evelyn turned and walked onto the ice, her movements stiff and unnatural.
Evelyn, stop!
The cracks spread, and the whispers returned, louder now, more urgent. Liam's flashlight flickered as shadows began to emerge from the cracks in the ice, tall, spindly figures with glowing eyes. He realized with horror that the visitors weren't just coming from the darkness, they were coming from beneath the ice. Liam stumbled back from the lake's edge as the shadows closed in. Evelyn stood in the center of the ice, her arms outstretched, her hollow eyes fixed on the sky. The cracks widened, and the whispers grew into a deafening roar.
Evelyn!
The ice shattered, and the lake erupted in a geyser of freezing water and darkness. The shadows surged forward, their forms twisting and merging as they climbed out of the abyss. Liam turned and ran, but the shadows were faster. They surrounded him, their glowing eyes piercing the darkness. He felt their cold hands on his skin, their whispers in his mind.
Join us. The darkness is eternal.
But then a voice cut through the chaos, a voice he recognized.
Liam!
It was Jonas. The old man stood at the edge of the lake, his hands raised. In one hand he held a small, glowing object, a shard of ice that pulsed with an otherworldly light.
The key. It's the only way to stop them.
Liam didn't hesitate. He fought through the shadows, their claws tearing at his skin, and reached Jonas. The old man pressed the shard into his hands.
Break it. Break the gateway.
Liam looked at the shard, then at the lake. The shadows were pouring out of the abyss, their numbers growing by the second. He raised the shard high and brought it down onto the ice. The shard shattered, and a blinding light erupted from the lake. The shadows screamed, their forms dissolving into smoke as the light spread. The ice reformed, sealing the gateway. The whispers stopped, the darkness receded, and then silence. Liam stood at the edge of the lake, breathing heavily. The town was quiet, the streetlights flickering back to life. Jonas was gone, and Evelyn lay unconscious on the ice. He ran to her, pulling her to safety. She stirred, her eyes fluttering open.
Liam, what happened?
It's over. We stopped them.
But as he helped her to her feet, he noticed something strange. The scratches on her skin were gone. Her eyes were clear, her color returned.
Evelyn, how do you feel?
She smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes.
I feel different, like I've been asleep for a long time.
Liam's relief turned to unease. He looked down at his own hands and froze. The scratches on his arms were gone too. And then he felt it, a cold, creeping sensation in the back of his mind. A whisper, faint but unmistakable.
You cannot escape the dark.
Evelyn's smile widened, her eyes glinting with an unnatural light.
They're not gone, Liam. They're just waiting.
Liam's heart sank as he realized the truth. The visitors hadn't been defeated. They had found a new way in, through him, through Evelyn, through anyone who had been touched by the darkness. The gateway was sealed, but the darkness was already inside them, and it was only a matter of time before it woke. Liam and Evelyn left Barrow the next day, the town's endless night fading behind them. But as they drove into the sunlight, Liam couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. In the rearview mirror, he thought he saw a shadow move, a tall, spindly figure with glowing eyes. But when he looked again, it was gone. The whispers, however, remained, and they were growing louder.